So let's talk about a psychology of time management. How do we change our mindset in such a way that we become really, really effective at managing our time? Well, we start off with this very simple fact, is that your beliefs equal your realities. The way that you manage your time now, in fact, every single part of your life is determined by your beliefs about that part of your life. If you believe that you are an excellent time manager, that you are effective and efficient and productive and a high achiever, then you will be. However, most people have funny beliefs about time management. Sometimes they believe they're good at it when they're not, but mostly they believe that if you manage your time too well, you are not as spontaneous or as natural or as normal. The fact of the matter is, the better you manage your time, the more you can be completely spontaneous and free. So the starting point of a psychology of time management is, number one, is to recognize that your time equals your money, and your time and money equals your life. That when we're talking about here is life management, but we're also talking about money management. You notice that you can exchange time for money, and you can also pay money in order to buy time. But both time and money combined equal life or happiness. When we talk about time management, what we're talking about is having enough time so that we can be happier in every aspect of our life. We can be happier at our work, we can have more time for our relationships, more time for our health, more time for personal and professional development, more time for emotional and spiritual growth, and so on. So therefore, when you begin to look upon time, when your belief begins to shift so that you see time as the fundamental resource of life, then your attitude toward the way you use your time begins to change. Now, the second key in the psychology of time management is your self-image. Now, what do we know about self-image? We know that the way you see yourself, your inner mirror, determines your external performance. The way you see yourself, and we have a phenomenon called self-image modification. What does that mean? It means that if you continue to see yourself and think of yourself as an excellent time manager, your external performance begins to change and you begin to use your time more effectively. How do you change your self-image? Well, one of the ways is by questioning and changing your self-ideal. You see, our self-image is largely formed by the people that we admire and look up to, whether we know them personally or read about them or something else. So a good question is, in terms of time management, who do you most admire and respect? Who would you most like to be like? Who do you feel is really well organized and very productive and gets a lot done? What you do is you begin using that person as your ideal and patterning your behavior after the most effective time manager that you know, and surprise, surprise, your own time management starts to get better. And this brings us to the most important part of the human psyche, which is your self-esteem. Now, your self-esteem has been defined many ways, but your self-esteem is largely how much you like yourself, how much you respect yourself, how much you value yourself. And what we've determined is that underlying self-esteem is what is called self-efficacy. Self-efficacy means that you like yourself to the degree to which you feel you are effective at performing what's important to you. So every single act of time management where you feel more effective and more capable and more competent causes your self-esteem to go up. It causes you to like yourself more and makes you more effective, better, more personable, more relaxed, happier in every part of your life. There's probably no skill that's more closely correlated with success and achievement in every part of your life than the ability to manage your time well.
Research into how it is that some people move up. In the course of their working lifetime, they move up, and they move up financially, and they eventually earn a lot of money. And the great majority of people don't. They just very seldom improve themselves. Well, what he found was that the thinking characteristic of these people was long-time perspective. They were long-term thinkers. They were thinking today of the consequences of their behaviors in terms of where they wanted to be in the future.
Your ability to set priorities and to stick to those priorities is absolutely essential to your personal and professional effectiveness. In this session, we're going to talk about the key ideas and rules that you can use in order to set priorities and to get more done. Recently, in a study of 104 chief executive officers, they asked them what were the qualities that would be most likely to put a young person onto the fast track in his or her career. And the number one quality agreed to by more than 85% of the executives was the ability to set priorities, the ability to select the relevant from the irrelevant. And I've discussed this with thousands of managers over time, And you know what I found out is they all say the same thing. Their biggest source of frustration is people who are not working on the most important use of their time. So let's talk about some of the keys to setting priorities. Key number one is what is called the 80-20 rule. Now, everybody's heard about the 80-20 rule. It's called the Pareto principle. It was developed by an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto in 1895. And what he discovered is over a large enough number of samples that 20% of what you do accounts for 80% of your results. 20% of your customers account for 80% of your sales. 20% of your products account for 80% of your profits. 20% of your transactions require 80% of the time involved. So the 80-20 rule says to Pareto everything, is to always be looking at what you have to do and say, what are the 20% of the things that I do that are most important to my success, both in the short term and in the long term? Look at your whole company. Look at all of your activities. What are the 20% of the things that you do that give you the greatest bang for the buck? Now, the second key to setting priorities is to distinguish between the urgent and the important. Telephones ringing, people coming in, mail, a temporary crisis, problems, interruptions, and so on. Most people spend most of the time working in the area of the urgent and apparently immediately important. The second quadrant are the things that are important but not urgent. The third area are the things that are urgent but not important. For instance, somebody calling you, but it's not a particularly important thing. And the fourth area are the things that are neither urgent nor important. What is it that the average person does and that you have to get free of? Well, they work in quadrant number one all the time because these are pressing. When they get caught up with quadrant number one, they drop to quadrant number three, and they do what is urgent but not important. If they get caught up with quadrant number three, they relax and pay themselves off by doing things in quadrant number four, things that are neither urgent nor important. However, it is in working more in quadrant two, doing the things that are important to your career and to your life, but which are not particularly urgent, that you can increase your effectiveness dramatically. These are working on your personal and professional skills, spending time with your family, working on long-term reports, upgrading your abilities, and so on. The things that are important but not urgent are the most vital things to your long-term future. So a critical part of setting priorities is to ask yourself, what are the important with your values? So when we talked about goals, we talked about what are your most important goals. With regard to values and priorities, you have to say, what is most important to me? What do I believe in? What do I stand for? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And you'll find that high performance comes when your goals and your values are congruent, and low performance comes when your goals and your values clash with each other, when you're working at something that is inconsistent with what is really important. And this brings us to number 4 key in priorities. What are your unique strengths? Again, when we look at the most effective men and women in our society, we find that every one of them has taken the time to think through what they are particularly good at. What are you particularly good at? What are the strengths and abilities that have led to your success in life to date? What is it that you do easy that comes difficult to other people? What are you especially good at doing? Leaders are those who deploy themselves carefully in the only working areas where they can employ their unique strengths to their highest levels of excellence and distinction. So question number 5 is, looking around you, what are you better at than other people? Of all the things you do, what are you better at? What are you really good at doing? Where do you make a significant contribution in your work? And where could you become better in order to make an even greater? Ask yourself, since you're going to have to live the rest of your life in the future, what are the opportunities of tomorrow? What are the things that you can do today that will lead to great payoffs in the future, based on everything that you know? Think always in terms of future orientation. It's the hallmark of the superior thinker. Where do we go from here? What do we do from here? Futurity simply asks the question, what is the positive potential future impact of what I'm doing? In one of the most longitudinal studies on success, what they found was that men and women who were very successful had what they called long-time perspective. They found that cross-culturally, throughout all social, economic, and racial groups, people who had the longest time perspective were always the men and women who accomplished the most. Now, what did this mean? It meant that everything that they did on a day-to-day basis, they asked themselves, how is this likely to affect me 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years out? And the longer the time perspective, the more likely it was that those people would move up socioeconomically. They also found that people who had short time perspective, people who were only thinking about how these things would affect them today, people, if you like, were always looking for the things that were fun, and when you begin to really look at your life, you'll find that there's always enough time to do the important things, but the critical thinking skill is to look at your work and do what Thomas J. Watson said, founder of IBM, think. Think about your work before you begin. Think about your work before you begin.